Thanks for joining us on Newsnight this evening. Bad news that you've got for us. The fact that our household net wealth has decreased and we're looking as though we're at the same figures as we were when the country was in a recession in 2008. That says something about how much trouble we're in as South Africans.
Yeah, unfortunately that's the case, and it was indeed devastating. 2018 wasn't a good year. The same as 2008-9 when we had the recession was a really bad year for households in terms of their wealth. In other words, wealth, when I refer to wealth, it's their total assets minus their debts. And that amount, as you said, shrank by 450 billion last year. It's almost R500 billion. So deep trouble.
Well, if the figures are shrinking by 450 billion rand, how many assets or how much of an asset value do South African families actually have? Like, just realistically speaking, not even in the urban areas, not even around Sandton, how much assets or do people actually have in the rural areas, for example, in the townships?
Yeah, if you look at in nominal terms, it's actually a big amount. It's more than 12 trillion rand. So that's why the 450 billion is 6% of the amount that we lost. But the 6% is big. It's big enough, as you said, because it's now at the same level as we had in 2008. In other words, we didn't grow in our wealth in a decade per household now. So if we look at the total value, it consists of your residential property, your assets, the value of your property, and also the value of what you've got in a pension fund or your savings, as well as the value of your cars, your furniture, appliances, everything. That's the assets, and then you subtract all your debts like your mortgages, car loans, personal loans, credit cards, shop cards, micro loans. Subtract that from your assets and then you get to your net wealth. So it's not a calculation that households do all the time because they're more focused on their income and their expenditure. Whereas it's something they have to do like every year almost in order to see where they're still in their financial plan to reach their goals, to retire at an acceptable living standard someday, to be resilient against financial shocks. And also to make sure that you don't default on your debts. So you have to do the calc, and unfortunately there's very few households.
But then what are the good news in this? Like, I mean, you've given us the bad news, so hopefully there's some good news there, but hopefully the good news also comes with how exactly is it that households can start having practical tools to utilize so that they can start gaining back that household wealth.
Yeah, the bad news came about from the value of mostly the financial assets shrinking last year because most of households' pension funds are invested on the stock exchange. And last year the stock exchange plummeted as a result of a lot of foreign factors such as the US-China trade war.
Gotcha.
And emerging market shares just plummeted. Now the good news is almost all of those wealth that was lost last year has been made up in the first 4 months of this year because the trade war seemed to be resolved. Tencent in China's share price recovered. Naspers got a big interest in Tencent. Naspers share price increased. A lot of emerging market share prices just increased. So the value of our pension funds recovered to a very large extent. But the problem still remains. We are very, very vulnerable to what's happening in the rest of the world. If something bad happens there, unfortunately, it hits us full on and our pension funds just loses value. So we need to find a way in our economy to make us a lot more resilient against all these foreign shocks.
Yeah, I mean, Johan, it's a conversation that you and I can possibly have for the entire night. It's just about how is it that we can better mitigate against some of those external factors that are leveling against, how our common economy is actually faring. But whilst you're talking about this, I'm just thinking of households that don't even have assets of this nature and don't even have pension funds and don't even have, assets invested in the JSE. How's it that they are surviving? But we're going to leave our conversation there for this evening. Thanks a lot for joining us there. We've got the economist and momentum researcher Johan van Tonder speaking to us about household wealth and where we're currently sitting. And according to him, not good news, but it looks as though we may have weathered that storm.